Good interface design is a lot like a balancing act in that its success is determined largely by the degree of balance that occurs between visual form and technical function. That's partly because the interface serves as both a boundary and a bridge at the same time, right? Because it's the midway point between the user and the system. It's what allows the person to come in and do things. It's what gives them a hint at what lies behind that first screen, okay? So it has to be useful and it has to be reliable. And for it to be both of those things, it means that first and foremost, we have to give people the things that they want or the things that they need. We also have to give it to them when and where they want it. At what step in their process is it appropriate to surface certain things? At what points do they need to be able to take certain actions? We have to address issues of context. And finally, we have to deliver it in a visual format that ensures that they can and want to access all of it. Because if they don't take action, then they don't achieve any intended goal and they don't reap any of the potential benefit that comes with the achievement of that goal. So there's a lot to consider here. There's a lot that has to be surfaced and made available at any given time. And essentially, you're trying to fit it all on something that amounts to, the surface of a cup of coffee. Not a small task. When it comes to what people see on the screen, every element counts. Although the functionality of an application or a site is certainly important, the form that's used to deliver that functionality is equally, if not more important. Okay, and that's things like how the content is organized, how the screen is laid out, how we use things like audio or video to enhance the experience or enhance understanding, how people actually use their hands and fingers to move through data, right? On touch screens, this is even more important because we've got all these new gestures and new ways to control things. And the reason all of that is so incredibly important is because no matter how technically superior the code may be or how deep its functionality may be, the bottom line is this. An application or site whose interface is difficult to use will not be used. We won't do it. We won't stick around and suffer through it. We won't muddle through it. We'll quit and we'll call support, or we'll say, the heck with this. There are 8 million other products out there that do the same thing. I'm going to check out one of those. We're living in an age where there are an infinite number of choices available to us. Because of that, the bar is much, much, much higher for good interface design. We have no tolerance for things that don't allow us to do what we need to do. And again, the reason we have such little tolerance is because we know there are other options available. So we don't have to stick around and suffer through it. We can go check out something else. We can find another solution. And because we can, we absolutely will. So you cannot afford poor interface design on multiple levels. So as we get into the nuts and bolts of interface design, let's set a few ground rules first. First and foremost, to most people, the user interface is the system. The two are one and the same. For instance, have you ever watched somebody open up Google and type a full URL into the search field as opposed to typing that full URL in the address bar at the top of the browser? Why do they do that? Well, they do that because to them, Google is the internet. That's the way you use the internet. Much like that, what they see on the screen is the sum total of their understanding of the system. So no matter what things it may do beyond that first screen, some sense of what's possible has to be made apparent. A well-designed interface allows someone to start using something immediately. No training, no manuals, no tools, no tips, no nothing. Get in, get going. Interface design has to be audience appropriate. Just because you understand it doesn't mean someone else will. One of my cardinal rules always has been to remember that you're not designing for yourself, okay? We're subjective human beings by nature, and we know ourselves better than we know anything else. So it's very easy to think inside the box of our own experience. It's very easy to come up with things that make sense to us. But for every decision you make, you have to think to yourself, would this person that I'm intending this for understand this? Would this label make sense to them? Will they know how to use this control? Should it be a button or a link? Which one will they know how to use? Inappropriate interface design is the number one killer of great product ideas. Things that make perfect sense on paper die painful, horrible deaths because Their interfaces are so bad and so confusing and so full of options that no one really wants or needs that no one can see the value. Okay? It's obfuscated. The bottom line rule behind great interface design is this: it's infinitely better to perfectly meet the needs of the critical few than to poorly meet the needs of many. Okay? And I'm going to explain that. From the very beginnings of software development, programming, the essential goal was to create flawless software. No matter what the use condition is, no matter who the person is, no matter what they do, the idea is to bulletproof the system so it does not fail. Okay, that means you're trying to account for every possible use case, every possible scenario, every possible exception. That quickly became a very standardized way of thinking, and it's carried through this industry for a very long time. However, user experience, good user experience, takes a bit of a different tack. It says, you know what? It's not possible to account for every single case. So figure out what the majority of people need to be able to do. Make sure that that critical part of your audience can do exactly what they need to do it well, do it in a way that they totally understand what's happening, that they completely see the value of the outcome, and that all the conventions and metaphors and everything else that you present makes sense to them. Those people, that critical few, those are your target users. Those are the people who will buy your product. Those are the people who will recommend your product. Those are the people who stand to gain the most from using your product. Those are the people you have to focus on. You cannot be everything to everyone. It's simply not possible, especially in an age of complexity like the one that we live in now. So focus on meeting the core needs of the people who are most important to you, the people who stand to gain the most from using your product, okay? Because it's those people who will also provide the most benefit back to you in terms of increased use, in terms of product sales, whatever it may be. Focus on them, forget everything else. Let's talk about some core principles of good user interface design. First and foremost is predictability. And that essentially means that labels, instructions, icons, images are all things that we can use to set expectations. They're things that tell us what to do. Touch this button right here. Click this link. They tell us what will happen. Open this file. Drag this over here. Do something else. They tell us where we can go. They give us a sense of place. Where are we in the grand scheme of things? They also tell us how the screen will respond. If we do this, this other thing will happen. Predictability means that we can accurately predict the outcome of an interaction with something. And when we can do that, we have a much higher degree of confidence in our ability to actually use what's in front of us. That's important because if we're confident, if we're comfortable, if we feel safe and secure, then we're more likely to keep using something. If there's an intended benefit and you need people to derive that benefit in order to drive value back to you, then giving people a sense of predictability is a very good place to start. The second core principle is consistency. Usefulness and usability is improved when similar parts of an interface are expressed in similar ways. And that largely means functional consistency, which leverages the things that we already know about how something works. It builds on our prior experiences and presents us with things we already know how to do. It means that the things that we see have familiar meanings and familiar actions. It means that we have navigational reference points that tell us what we can do, where we can go. Having that simplifies usability and increases intuitive learning, which, as I always say, really means single trial learning. Use it once, remember it forever. The example that I'm using here is the Mac OS, and almost any operating system pretty much operates the same way. If you look at an Android system or a Windows system, they all pretty much operate consistently across multiple devices, right? In this case, you look at the Mac interface and you see certain things. The window controls that allow you to close or hide or expand a window. The style of buttons and menu components. All right, those are pretty much consistent whether you're working on a desktop machine, a laptop, an iPhone, or a tablet. Same icons, same visual style, same meaning, same action, same effect. We know how to use those things because we've done it before. All right, that's functional consistency. If you have ever used an Android tablet and you also happen to have an Android phone, you're going to see the same thing. Consistency that leverages the things that you already know about how the things in front of you work. The next principle is absolutely one of the most important. It's called progressive disclosure. And what that means is that everything should progress naturally, from simple to complex. Think of it as wading into the shallow end before you dive into the deep end. Okay, we want to sort of get adjusted first, get our bearings, and then we want to move further. That's sort of our natural way of experiencing things. It's the natural way that the brain works. We build upon each step of learning. So everything that we're confronted with in an interface should build from simple to complex. What that means is that only the necessary or requested information is displayed at any given time. I only want what I need right now to accomplish what I'm trying to do. I only need what I've asked for. I don't want anything other than that. I don't want anything that interferes with what I'm trying to accomplish. So progressive disclosure helps people manage complexity without becoming confused or frustrated or disoriented. That disorientation comes from noise. Some of you have probably heard of the phrase signal to noise, which actually comes from, radio broadcast and satellite signal broadcast. What it means is that signal, the important part that we care about, is what's coming through loud and clear, and noise or static is minimized. So the signal's loud, it's clear, it's obvious. So information that's presented to somebody who isn't interested in it or isn't ready to process it is noise. Background stuff. It's not what we want. It's in the way. It's distracting us. Here's an example. Let's say we're looking at a blog on our phone about kittens. I have a new kitten and I need to know how to take care of it. So the first thing that I see, for example, is, okay, I've got 2 articles I can look at. The 3 reasons my new kitten keeps meowing, or care and feeding of my new kitten. If I make a choice, I choose the 3 reasons my new kitten keeps meowing. And, guess what? It drops down. I get a small sampling of the content that's contained in the article, right? That helps me make a decision as to whether that's what I'm looking for or not. At the same time, notice that the other article hasn't gone away. So my choices are still there. What just happened there is I got enough information to allow me to make a choice. And then when I make a choice, I got a little more information. If I care about it, I move on. If I don't, I go back. That's progressive disclosure. And you can apply this in numerous ways in anything that you are designing. Good interface design is intuitive. And as I said a minute ago, intuitive really means single trial learning. We learn behaviors from experiences all across the web, from different devices, from different real-world places and objects, from all over the place, okay? Everything that we do is imprinted in our brains, and it gets called upon in similar situations, all right? So that means that interactions should be easy to learn and easy to remember. In ideal situations, we use it once, we learn it rapidly, and we remember it forever. But in reality, what happens a lot is that we use it a few times and we figure it out, but we're also sort of hoping that we can remember how to do it the next time. So that's why things need to be intuitive. That's why interface design needs to enable single trial learning, right? The process needs to be straightforward and simple and uncluttered so that when we have the experience, we absorb it, we remember it, we file it away in a clear, concise manner, because there isn't too much to remember. There's a good reason that most mobile devices use the type of layout that you see here, okay, which is essentially icon-driven rows and columns, okay, whether it's an iPhone or an Android device or, even some of the early Windows phones, all used an icon-driven screen, all right, but there's a reason that's continued, well into 2013. We've been doing this for 10 years now, at least. And the reason that basic layout hasn't changed too much, aside from the specific visual style of the icons, okay, or how many get exposed on a screen, the reason it hasn't changed is because that's something that we automatically know and remember, right? There's reflex there, there's habit there. We get it, we know how to use it. We don't have to think about it. It's a no-brainer. So that's why that design still makes sense. And until something comes along, that leverages an even greater memory, which is unlikely, by the way, it's going to remain this way for a while. because we get it. We know exactly how to use it, and it requires no thought whatsoever. It's expected, it's predictable, and it's intuitive. Good information design presents components and information in context and in a very clear hierarchy. That means that the things that we see on the screen are all related together somehow. They all have similar context, and they're organized, prioritized in such a way where that relationship is made clear. When you're designing, the things that you have to ask yourself to make sure that you are providing proper context and proper hierarchy are as follows. First and foremost, are items that are functionally connected or logically connected grouped together visually. When objects, elements, or information on the screen is close together in terms of proximity or visually styled the same way or physically constrained inside a box, people naturally assume that those things are connected in some way. So if you do any of those things, if you treat things visually the same way, if you put two elements inside a box together, then they absolutely should be connected. And if not, make sure there's clear separation or segregation between those elements. Is the information on the screen presented in the order of importance to the user? Are the things that they care about most taking up prominent positions on the screen? Do they call attention to themselves in some way? Are they prioritized in terms of being higher up on the screen or above the fold? Going along with that, does the visual hierarchy on the screen and the functional behavior of those things match what that person expects to do first, or second, or third? Finally, is the overall visual layout consistent with the mental model of the person using it? And is that approach used consistently? Okay, does it match their expectation? Does it match the way they expect to be able to see things or do things? And does that continue? If you take a look at this example from a health insurance website, you'll see a very strong sense of context and hierarchy. Okay, there's very clear organization of things. At the very top, you can see that prescription drugs, are covered in this section. Then you have this very clear, very obvious dividing line, this big blue bar that says hospital services. Everything under there is hospital service coverage. And notice that underneath there, each one of these things is consistently spaced and aligned and located in a certain proximity with the other items. Go down again, another blue bar, number of physicians in your area. That's a signal. This is a new heading. And as opposed to just making that headline bold or something like that, this is very clear segregation, okay? That blue bar immediately signals this is something new. This is a new set of information. So this is a really good example of how good interface design can make context and hierarchy very clear. The final principle I want to leave you with is called Hick's Law. Hick's Law says that every additional choice increases the time required to make a decision. Okay? Put that another way, the more choice you give people, the easier it is for them to choose nothing. There are lots of physiological and psychological reasons for that, but what you need to remember is that that's kind of the way it works, okay, in general. The more we're confronted with, the less likely we are to do something. Clay Shirky, who is a widely regarded consultant on all things related to